If There Was a God, Would You Worship It? By SMHComix. Part 1 of his personal collection anthology. Throughout her life, Ronnie had heard that question, or a similar one, 4 times. The first time she heard it was when she was 4 years old, not yet going to school. Her mother was watching the television in the living room, and Ronnie had snuck out of her room to watch as well. It was late, and much past her bedtime, when she heard the question being asked to someone on the TV by a man with a very serious-sounding voice. It was an interview, 2 men sitting across a table from each other. One was plainly dressed, a simple brown jacket and blue button-up shirt, and black hair parted to the side. The other man was old, with snow-white hair, dressed in all black, aside from a white collar. The text at the bottom of the screen read, "Father James Prescott questions Ben Hampton on his atheistic views."
No, I don't think I would. I mean, if this God were in control of everything, and still chose to permit the horrors of this world.
The other man spoke before the TV was shut off. Ronnie looked up to see that she had been spotted, her mother standing over her with a stern look on her face. Ronnie's mother carried her up to her room and back to bed, and gently tucked her in. Ronnie's mother was a kind woman. The second time wouldn't be until she was 15. She had been attending Mass with her mother and her best friend, Laura. Her and Laura were being a bit too loud, making jokes and laughing, when they had caught the attention of Pastor Michael. After the service was over, Pastor Michael took the 2 girls into a side hallway in the church, just off of the exit with Ronnie's mother. He scolded the girls, asking them things like,
"How dare you act that way in the house of the Lord?"
Laura started yelling back at the pastor, saying she didn't even believe in God. The pastor looked confused and shocked, then very angry. He began shouting at the top of his lungs, saying that there was definitive proof of God's existence, eventually screaming at them to get out. The car ride home was silent, with Ronnie's mother eventually breaking the silence. "Laura, if you knew for a fact that God was real, would you worship him?" Ronnie doesn't remember what Laura said. Other than that, her response was negative. This day marked the decline of Ronnie's faith in the church. The third time occurred when Ronnie was 19 and incredibly intoxicated at a party. She was a sophomore in college at the time, at some backwater state university. She was there with her friends, but after getting about 5 shots in and too many beers to care, she seemed to have lost track of them. She didn't care though, as she was nice and warm and seeing the world in a much more fun state than it usually was. Across this living room, filled with young people, and flashing colored lights and blaring music, there was this man. Yes, for the sake of simplicity, we'll call it a man. The man stood there, with his pale white eyes trained on the poor girl, drooling only slightly. Ronnie, however, was far too gone to notice any of those details. What she saw standing there was a tall, handsome young man with curly brown hair staring at her, and she wasn't about to let that go to waste. She drunkenly stumbled her way over to the man and fell into his chest, half accidentally. The man caught her and smiled. His teeth were much too long for what he was pretending to be, but Ronnie didn't notice. "Hey, cutie, I saw you staring at me," Ronnie said, slurring her words. "Oh yeah, I was just thinking about how warm your skin must be on the inside." "What?" Ronnie said, not really recognizing the danger of what he said, but rather just asking out of confusion. "Don't worry about it. Your skin is completely safe on your body at the moment. They just wanted me to observe you for a little while." "What are you talking about?" Ronnie was starting to get more confused. "Don't worry about that either. Can I ask you a question, Ronnie?" Not worrying about how he knew her name, she nodded and smiled calmly. This pleased the man, so he smiled his long-toothed smile and said, If you met a god, would you worship it? It was at this point that Ronnie threw up all over herself and the man left. If only this memory wasn't lost to the intoxication, maybe Ronnie could have spared herself a lot of trouble. The fourth and final time came 2 months after Ronnie's mother's death. She had been murdered. Some bastard shot up her office building. Ronnie was only 25 at the time. In her grief, she tried many things to help ease the pain. She tried going back to church, and that only lasted about 2 weeks before she came to the conclusion that her mother's faith was not her own, and that hers was still rather lost. Maybe she would try again after she climbed out of this well of sorrow. Just maybe. She tried drinking her tears away, and that worked for about 3 days before the alcohol stopped numbing the pain and started making it harder. Finally, she discovered a support group. They met every Tuesday, and Ronnie found that being in the company of people who can at least partially understand her plight was the best thing for her right now. On her first day, she met Sarah, the group's organizer, as well as Tim, Alondra, Piper, Freddie, and John. These were all people dealing with the grief of losing a loved one, except for John. John was a tall man who dressed in a very nice black suit every meeting. He pretended to be grieving the loss of his wife, whom he called Carla. He said they had been married for 10 years, but seemed to have forgotten to change his face from that handsome, wide-eyed young man with the mop of curly brown hair. No one questioned him, though. Each time he told his story, it was as if they fell into a trance. Everyone immediately fell into tears, and lots of, "Oh my God, John, I'm so sorry." Even Ronnie fell victim to his charms. He did fix the teeth, though, and John was convinced that is what sealed the deal on his performance. After a few more weeks of getting Ronnie to be wrapped around his finger, he made his move. He approached Ronnie after the conclusion of their meeting and did his best to look kind. "Ronnie, I had a question for you that had been burning in my mind for some time now." He spoke with the cadence of an older man, not remembering that his appearance didn't match it. "Go right ahead, John. I'm all ears," Ronnie answered, trying to be sweet to what she perceived as a grieving old gentleman. "Are you much of a church-goer?" "Not these days, no. I was when I was little, but I've gotten a little distant from Christianity." "Well, on Thursday, my church is having a brief little ceremony. I'd like to invite you." Feeling touched that the old man, racked with the pain of losing his wife, would invite her to such a thing, she accepted. Ronnie picked John up from his house, which wasn't really his, but the homeowners could no longer say otherwise, and they headed to John's church. It was a large building a few towns over, with the look of one of those old stone cathedrals. They had left at 7:30 p.m. and would be just in time for 8 o'clock Mass. It was dark, and snow littered the ground in sheets on the grass and large piles in the parking lot. John led her inside through the front entrance, down a few hallways, a few rights and lefts, until they finally made it to the chapel. The chapel is truly not a good place for Ronnie to be. John led her to a pew near the front, saying it was very important for her to get a good view. When Ronnie had first entered the chapel, there appeared to be no one else there. She figured they must have arrived early, but the very second she sat down, loud chattering began. She took in her surroundings as suddenly each and every pew was filled with people of all shapes and sizes. Of course, none of them were really people, but Ronnie did not know this. She couldn't make out what anyone was saying. It was all so loud, and there were so many people. Where did they all come from? Had they already been there? Wait, where am I? These questions raced through her mind, and she felt a hand on her shoulder. It was John, looking at her with what he thought was a reassuring smile. "Don't worry about all that. You need to pay attention." All at once, the talking stopped, Every person in the room was facing the front of the chapel, which held the altar. At the altar was something that Ronnie could not see, poor girl. What she saw was an old-looking man wearing the vestments of a priest. His wrinkles were deep in his face, and his hair was all but gone. His posture was horrible, and his eyes were sunken in, but that didn't stop the yellow glow of them from shining outward. Ronnie felt scared. What Ronnie saw at the altar was not what was actually standing there. The poor girl is only human, and observing it directly is too much for a human brain, so it conjures false images. Luckily for you, I am willing to describe it to you, so that you may be spared attempting to view it yourself. It had 3 faces, each facing a different direction. The faces were mounted to a sphere of floating skin, muscle, meat, and bone. The bone stabbed through the skin in countless places, with muscles wrapped tightly around them, spilling what resembled innards onto the ground. The flesh underneath the tight skin wriggled and pulsated in a constant state of destroying itself to make room for more of itself. Each of the 3 faces were singing a different part of the same melody. Man's maker. Each of the 3 faces were vomiting blood and bits of flesh. It was simultaneously the size of a mountain and the size of an atom. Ronnie gazed at the supposed priest, and it gazed right back. His gaze felt like it was penetrating straight to Ronnie's soul, grasping it without her approval. It hurt. The priest opened its mouth, and an impossibly low rumble erupted from it. It sounded like thunder being caught and ripped apart by a giant, and Ronnie's nose began to bleed profusely. In the next moment, the rumble ceased instantly, and the priest was now somehow in the middle of a sermon at the altar. It spoke in a language that Ronnie didn't understand, but listening to the words somehow made Ronnie feel at peace. In the moment following that, Ronnie was alone in the church. The other people had disappeared, and even John was gone. The lights were out, and all Ronnie could see were 2 bright yellow lights at the altar. She moved towards them. She needed to reach out, to be in the glow of the lights. She didn't know why, she didn't care why. She needed the lights. The lights spoke.
If I were God, would you love me?
Ronnie felt her mouth move on its own, and she answered, "Yes."
If I were God, would you worship me?
"Yes," Ronnie answered again. Her body was answering on its own. It wasn't that she was being forced to say yes, but rather that her body knew what it needed to do. No need for Ronnie's input.
If I were God, would you do anything for me?
"Yes."
I am God.
"Yes."
Feed yourself to me.
"Yes." Ronnie slowly, but without hesitation, climbed into her god's mouth, and it closed its bloody maw.